My name is Alan Nymark. I know many of you, but not all of you. I'm part of Stuart's team, trying to convince people that the economy and the environment are two sides of the same coin. We've had a wonderful session this morning. I mean, the speakers have been fabulous and the discussion very good. To begin this afternoon, I'll keep my remarks very short and introduce our first speaker. 4 points, really, I wanted to make, just picking a bit up on the afternoon and anticipating, or this morning, and anticipating the afternoon a little bit. First of all, let's admit the complexity of this up front. And productivity remains poorly understood. And the theories of growth are under renovation. So those of you who are not economists in the crowd, don't be cowed by those who think that growth is a very simple concept. If we only get on board and government implements what it should, all will be solved. Innovation, by comparison, is a relatively new subject in public policy. And while we know something about both of these issues, we know less about the connection. And session 3 really is all about the connection from a more practical point of view. We've heard a number of ideas this morning about industrial innovation performance. I think the general view was that it remains lackluster in Canada, or at least we are not being ambitious enough. Some will say that we don't have an entrepreneurial business class in Canada. Others will say that we simply need the government to set a general framework with appropriate access to capital and get out of the way. Still others say we need to make some big bets on some highly targeted Canadian strengths, while others talk about a culture of innovation and partnerships between universities, government, and industry labs and business. Now, none of these are new ideas. From my own perspective, the question really is, where do we place our bets going forward? And we have 3 panels, a one-person panel to start with, who will address what has worked in their jurisdictions or in their organizations, and where we should be focusing our efforts in the future. A last word before we start, and that's on the issue of scale. And my own point of view is that we are, in fact, falling behind in innovation, in growth, in competitiveness. Some worry about a long-term structural downgrading in our potential for economic growth. No one is championing this call, and there seems to be a lack of urgency in even addressing it. So we need leadership. Where is it to come from? The urgency is, there is some possibility that we are moving towards carbon pricing more intensively in the next couple of years than we might have anticipated in the last 5 years. Now, if we get carbon pricing, are we ready to design a strategy to match the kind of funds that may flow? Are we ready to implement? Have we taken advantage of this lull in activity over the last several years to be, in fact, ready to give good advice to those who want to pick up on these issues? And do we have the institutional frameworks to give jurisdictions and taxpayers the confidence that we can manage it effectively, efficiently, fairly, and with great impact? Okay, now I have the pleasure of introducing 3 panels. The first panel is John Elec on his own, who will speak to us about the U.S. experience in policymaking for innovation, drawing on his experience in various sectors. John is now a consultant. He has a deep and long background in relevant work. He's taught at several universities, and he worked at the U.S. Congress's Office of Technology Assessment over that agency's existence. So, John, over to you. You have about 20 minutes, if that's all right, and then we can have about 10 minutes discussion afterwards. Thank you very much. John?
Thanks, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to start again by thanking the SP folks for this, Stuart, Michelle, Jeff, and all of them. I've been really very impressed with the quality of the discussion last night at dinner and this morning here. Yesterday, we had meetings in Toronto, and I was very impressed. I think you're trying to do something right that's also very, very important, and I applaud you for that. On the other hand, I'm up here by myself, I guess. Are you isolating the Americans? Is that it? So I could give you a talk that's full of statistics from economics and, various metrics and so on. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell a couple of stories about how innovation actually takes place. And I'm going to do that in the context of climate change much more than energy, because I think the problem that Earth is facing is climate change. I mean, there's plenty of energy around. It's reasonably cheap. Unfortunately, it's mostly in the form of fossil fuels. It does what people want, doesn't cost a lot. You start your car and it runs. You plug in your computer and it boots up, so on and so forth. That's what people expect, and that's what they get. And for ordinary people, that's basically what they care about. If we think about what it takes to supply them with that energy today, and we think about what it will take them to supply them with clean energy tomorrow, we need to start by realizing that there are thousands or tens of thousands or maybe even hundreds of thousands of technologies involved, because technology development is fundamentally incremental. And when you have complex systems like our electrical grid, with the power plants and the power stations and the interconnections and the transformers and all the software these days that run it, it takes all those pieces working together to make it function, and there is space for innovation in most of those component level technologies. So that's by way of background. We've heard a lot about the importance of market demand. I like to put it in a little different terms. If you want innovation, it does come from the business sector, as we've heard over and over again. You need to offer an opportunity for people to make money off of innovation. To put it bluntly and crudely, that's what really counts. That's something that we learned a century ago from Joseph Schumpeter. We're all Schumpeterians now. He taught us much about innovation. Much of what he said is now conventional wisdom. And he was remarkably forward-looking in his analysis, probably the greatest economist of the 20th century. If we look at innovation in digital electronics, I'm sure everybody in this room has probably seen the Moore's Law trend. This is the analogous trend, not for integrated circuits, but for hard disk drives, the famously disruptive technology that Clayton Christensen wrote about actually in his PhD dissertation, and then in the innovator's dilemma. And what you see here, the real point of this slide is that you start out down here in the late 50s with the very first hard disk drive was designed and developed and sold by IBM. And it was about twice the size of this podium, and it had big metal platters in it, and cost about $50,000. Today, if you go up to the top of that curve, this is an old graph. It stops in '06 or '05 or something, and we're further than that now. But you know, these things are the size of a nickel. They cost a couple of bucks. They have made possible iPads and the kinds of portable PCs, laptops that everybody used until Steve Jobs and Apple put solid state memory in. And it's a revolutionary technology. What we see there is 100 million fold, 8, 9, maybe by now 10 orders of magnitude improvement. These are astronomical figures. It's really, really astonishing. Now, the real point of this slide is that there are, a huge number of innovations going in to making this curve this way. And right up here someplace, you see those little bumps? There was a huge scientific breakthrough about 15, 20 years ago. It was a discovery, an unexpected scientific discovery, a phenomenon called giant magnetoresistance, which allowed the people who make these devices, who are now mostly in East Asia, to reduce the size of the little memory domains in the disk still further. And the discovery of GMD earned the scientists a Nobel Prize, and it allowed the technologists who design disk drives to, improve the performance. But the point is that this unanticipated scientific discovery, which surprised the relevant community of condensed matter physicists, is just a little blip on that trend. Now here we see a comparably dramatic, radical innovation in a directly energy-related technology. This is jet propulsion. These are jet engines and gas turbines. That's an old idea. In fact, the basic thermodynamic cycle that a jet engine works on was patented in, I think, 1862. Certainly it was in the 19th century. The first actual industrial gas turbines were built in the first decade of the 20th century. It took another 40, 50 years before you could make a turbine that was small enough and powerful enough to get an airplane off the ground. And when they started to penetrate into military aircraft here around 1950, you see this is a fuel consumption figure now, so lower on the curve is better. You use less fuel for a given amount of power. And in 1950, these things were about 10, 15% as fuel efficient as a propeller-driven fighter plane. But they could fly faster and higher, and any propeller-driven plane in their sights was, dead meat. So it was hugely important for the military to get the best jet engines that they could. It was important, first of all, in Germany, where a lot of the early development was done, in Britain, in the United States, in the Soviet Union, and over time driven primarily by military imperatives coming out of the Cold War, we have an improvement. Is that 100 million fold improvement? No, it's an order of magnitude. And we're down about as low as we're likely to go as a consequence of steady incremental improvements in the basic technologies of these things. And there's another aspect of this that the next slide alludes to. Nate Rosenberg, another famous economist whose work I'm sure is familiar to many people in this room, noted years and years ago how important operating experience with complex technologies was in driving technical improvements. especially when jet engines found their way into commercial fleets, into civil airliners. The imperatives there, of course, are very different from military aircraft. You have to make money flying these things. That means you have to improve the fuel economy, you have to improve the reliability, you have to improve the time between maintenance. In 1950, jet engines had to be taken off the wing of a plane about every 25 hours and overhauled. 10, 15 years later, the figure was more like 1,000 hours, and now it's 100,000 hours. That is a huge, huge improvement, but it's in costs. It's not in fuel efficiency. Because in fuel efficiency, you're fighting the laws of physics. There's only, so much improvement that you can get out of most of our familiar energy-related technologies. Motors and generators have been, 97, 98, 99% efficient for decades. Because, we know how to do that. Here's a little different kind of example. I just pulled this off a Department of Energy report that came out just a couple weeks ago, because it shows a different way in which learning and experience gives rise to improvement. Those are not my colors. I would have chosen colors that you can read more easily. But the point of this is the actual cost, levelized cost of wind energy. You see how fast it comes down. There's all kinds of reasons for that, but the big reason, as the blue spikes going up, which are supposed to have blades on the top, demonstrate you just make these things bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like going from a DC-3 to a DC-9. That helps you reduce the fuel consumed per passenger seat mile. And if you make the wind turbine bigger for all kinds of technical reasons, you also get lower cost. And there's been a lot of learning here in terms of reliability and, but the point, again, that I would like to leave you with is that physicists know perfectly well that there is a maximum efficiency in any airfoil, and that's what wind turbines have. It's an airfoil, that turns. And that's like 67, 68%. You're never going to do better than that. So you have no choice but to make these things bigger and bigger and more of them and make sure they're reliable and sited properly. And if you can predict how the wind is going to vary in advance, and there are ways of doing that, you get better performance. But you are limited in ways that you are not limited to this point in digital electronics. And one of the things that's floating around in our energy and climate change debates is kind of a false analogy in which people say, well, when is Moore's law going to kick in for energy? Well, the simple answer is it's not, and it's silly even to think it would. And yet there are plenty of people out there who ought to know better, I just saw something in Science magazine from about 6 weeks ago that asked that very question in a book review by an energy specialist. When is Moore's law going to kick in on energy? I mean, come on, you ought to know better than that. Okay, so what do we take from all of this? Well, first, unless somebody actually makes cold fusion or something like that real, there aren't going to be any breakthroughs from scientific advance. What we get, what counts as a breakthrough, is the result of usually decades of incremental advance. We saw that with the gas turbine. Wind energy, of course, has been around for centuries. We've had steady improvement in road vehicles. It's from systems that have improved. Lower rolling resistance in tires, less drag in the brakes, smaller bearings that have less drag, more efficient engines that operate closer to the point of maximum thermal efficiency. That's what both multi-speed transmissions. You know, you've now got 8, 10 speeds in a transmission, and hybrids do. They just keep the engine operating where it is most efficient, but that efficiency is not going to go up very much in the future. So it takes a long time to do this, and the last point on this slide is that in the energy area, we have to accept that, you know, the costs in particular of some of the technologies we're looking at to help us out, like CCS, really are still uncertain and may or may not come down according to the predictions that the enthusiasts sometimes make. We are not on a path to accomplishing very much with energy as a fix for climate change. And the reason is that we have a fundamental trade-off. We have energy, as I said at the beginning, that does what people want for them already at a reasonable cost. And, you know, they're happy with it, they're satisfied with it. So it becomes difficult to put the kind of incentives in place that would drive much faster innovation, and you need much faster innovation, again, in thousands of technologies to make a difference for climate change. You know, more modest rates of innovation, more constrained innovation in terms of the technologies that improve will help you if your objective is to increase Canada's competitiveness in green technologies. And it will help you if your objective is to use fossil fuels more efficiently, but it won't help you much with climate change. And climate change, in my opinion, is the big problem. I'm going to skip over all except the last point at the bottom there, because a lot of big technologies need demonstration of a sort that's outside the parameters in which even the largest industrial corporations feel comfortable. That was true with jet engines, which came from companies like Rolls-Royce and Pratt and General Electric, but the procurement drive from the military was what made it happen. In nuclear power, we had demonstration programs in the United States and in other countries that made that happen. If we really want CCS, we will have to do demonstrations on a large scale. There's never going to be an economic motive in the absence of, you know, carbon prices that are over $100 a ton for private industry to do it on their own. And we need to decide what routes we want to take to deal with climate change. The nuclear power example that I call a government failure, even though I just applauded the demonstration efforts of the US government, goes back before the demonstration part of that effort. Because what happened, I won't try not to take too much time on this, what happened is that the Atomic Energy Commission in the United States, which is responsible for all this, was so wrapped up in making bombs, nuclear warheads, that they just, you know, they just let nuclear power drift for decades. And all these scientists running around wanting to make this kind of reactor or that kind of reactor and, you know, pressing home their vision. And some of them got money and some didn't, and it was start and stop. And at the end, when the decision came from high political levels to actually do something with nuclear power, there was really only one technological alternative left in the United States. That was the light water reactors that Admiral Rickover had developed and proven for nuclear submarines. So that was the only choice you had. Whether it was a good choice or not is debatable, and no point at this point in debating that unless you actually think that we're going to have another generation of alternative nuclear power reactors, which is possible, but at least in the United States, I think is relatively unlikely. We have lousy biofuels policies in the United States too, but I won't go into that. If somebody wants to talk about that in the question period, we can. This is the last slide. And this is, I'm sorry to end on a pessimistic note, but I have no choice in my view. I think you can have cheap energy. We have cheap energy today. There's a lot of fossil fuels still around. I think most of them in the end are probably going to be burned, not by the wealthy countries, by the poor countries in the world. You can have clean energy, but it's going to cost a lot. Can you really have both? Well, I don't see how you can in the foreseeable future. Maybe at some point you can. It's easy enough to do existence proofs with a computer model that shows, well, we could replace everything with renewables, blah, 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 and it won't cost very much. But the transition costs in shifting from where we are today to where we would like to be in the future are going to be very, very high. I think in the end, if you really want to take climate change seriously, and I think the world has to take it seriously because it's already biting in all kinds of ways, you need to treat it as a public good, not attach it to the energy sector as tightly as a lot of the debate has. I want to conclude by trying to answer Stuart's question of what's the research agenda? I think for Canada, for the United States, for India, for China, the agenda is pretty much the same. You need to actually map the plausible technological pathways from where we are today to where we would like to be in the future with clean energy by the sectors that create the greenhouse gases, the major sectors, electricity, industry, buildings, residential and commercial, and transportation, most of which is road vehicles, because the technologies involved there are different in all those sectors, and so are the thousands of innovations within each of those sectors that will be needed. And so are the policies and the driving forces and the companies involved. We know axiomatically that every technology is different, every industry is different, and at some level, every firm is different. That understanding has to be part of the foundation for policy development. Once you have mapped those plausible pathways, then you can seriously evaluate, debate, consider the policies that get you from where we are today to where we would like to be 50 years from now, and you can set priorities for what you want to do. Until you set priorities, you aren't going to accomplish very much in dealing with climate change. Thank you.
Questions, comments? Some controversial comments are entering this debate. Yes, please. Oh, sorry, at the back, and then we'll come up to the front, second one. Excuse me.
Hi, Juan from Synovus Energy. So is anybody plotting these pathways? Is anybody doing the work when those? Is anybody doing?
Hello. Is anybody currently doing this work to plot these pathways of where we are now to where we need to go? Because you hear that a lot when you travel around, but you never actually see the work being done. You never see it being, nobody says, hey, I'm working on this, and you just never see any of it.
Yeah. No, there is maybe a little bit, but I think you're absolutely right. Not much of it is actually going on. You have a lot of enthusiasts and advocates for particular solutions, and they will tell you how great it is, and they will, trot out maybe computer models and blah, blah, blah to try and justify. But it's the comparison and it's the linking of the scenarios with the policies that's really important.
Okay, up front here.
Hi, Mira Nathwani Crow from Shell. I wanted to ask you how would we treat climate mitigation as a public good, and what is the implication then to corporations that want to commercialize that?
Well, if it's a public good, that means we aren't going to expect market mechanisms to take care of it. It means that the government has to be involved as a purchaser and kind of the overseer, at least, of the operation. So the opportunities for the corporations are exactly the same as they are in some of the examples I had there. Clean water, well, there are plenty of companies who build the equipment that are in sewerage plants and pumping stations and pipes and valves and so on. It may not be, very, very high technology stuff, but in the future, after all, it's all going to be computerized, it's going to be part of the Internet of Things, and there is plenty of opportunity there.
Okay, yeah, Heather. And then George.
Hi, John. Heather Campbell from STTC. You mentioned that the U.S. has fairly lousy biofuels policy. How do you fix it? Because it's already down the garden path. How do you bring it back around to something that's effective, efficient, and bringing prosperity for Americans and perhaps even globally?
Thanks for that question. Gives me an excuse to talk about biofuels. I don't think you can back away. I mean, the driver in the U.S., as everybody probably knows, the renewable fuel standards set quotas for biofuels. Most of that is corn ethanol. Corn ethanol benefits agribusiness and biorefiners. It doesn't really give you any energy benefits and very, very small climate impact at best. Next generation biofuels technologically are much, much more difficult to commercialize, and it's been almost stalled. There's a little effort now. Somebody this morning said, biofuels are moonshine. Well, that's because corn ethanol is like corn liquor. And so the point is that it's, a hillbilly can do it, right? But the problem you're facing is that in the United States we have 250 million cars and trucks on our highways. Again, somebody else this morning said that the average age is 10 years. Actually, it's higher than that. It's about 12 plus years now. And the fleet then turns over quite slowly. So new technology takes many years to penetrate. And the new technology is mostly new internal combustion engine technology. And it is getting better, but it's for gasoline and diesel fueled vehicles. You have a market, and this is also true in Canada, all you have to do is look at your highways here, which is really made up of a whole kind of crazy quilt of niche vehicles. Sitting downstairs having breakfast this morning, and somebody rolled by in a bright yellow Corvette, with 500 horsepower under the hood, probably capable of 170 miles an hour. And then somebody else rode by in an SUV that probably uses about the same amount of fuel, and probably because of its tires is limited by its electronic governor to maybe 97 miles an hour. Might go 98 if you took the governor off. And these vehicles are sold as image items to the first purchasers. The used vehicle market works a little differently. There are hundreds of brands and nameplates on the market in the US, Canada, and in the world. The fragmentation of the market is increasing. So you may have really neat battery electric vehicles in a little bitty niche in metropolitan areas, 50,000 a year or something like that. Doesn't help you much with climate change. In fact, it's negligible.
We also have electric taxis here in Calgary. But it's more of a comment. Your first point near the end, that we need to map the plausible technology pathways by sector. A lot of that has been done, particularly through low carbon economies. I think the innovation for this research program that you mentioned is being able to link that to the policies that are needed to enable that to happen more rapidly. And so I actually think there is a research question in there as you posed it, but I don't think it's necessarily the mapping of the technologies. There's a lot of that in many sectors and subsectors, but we haven't considered at all what it would take to get there from policy point of view, from a governance point of view, an institutional point of view.
Thanks. That's another good question. Allows me to get back up on my soapbox. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of stuff out there. I don't find many of those studies particularly persuasive. Many of them, in my view, reflect particular interests, relatively narrow understanding of the technological possibilities. The evaluations are not on a comparable basis, and far too many of them focus on the endpoints, what you get if you actually can make a zinc air battery for your electric taxis in big cities, what you get from that. Doesn't say anything about whether zinc air battery is better than a lithium air battery. May or may not say that. Doesn't say anything really about what the ultimate cost is going to be, about the practical problems of lifetime and those sorts of batteries, and of what you actually do to commercialize a zinc air battery is, very attractive from a theoretical perspective. And I knew some very smart people back in the 1970s at the time of the two energy crises who were saying, oh, we're working on our zinc air battery, and just wait, 6 months from now we'll have it. It'll work. You'd be able to look at it and applaud us. Well, we're still waiting. There's too much of that by far.
John, that started to sound like a plea to reopen the OTA. Has your thinking evolved in terms of the kind of institution that is required to do this work?
I think that I don't think that OTA could have done it. I don't think the national academies can do it. I do think that there are groups that are trying to replicate some of those functions, and the problems with the old ways of doing technology assessment, whether it's national academies, whether it was OTA, whether it's the U.S. Energy Department today is, churns out a lot of these studies that we've been talking about. They're done by bureaucratic entrepreneurs. This is what they want to do in an organization like that. If you want to do it badly enough, you get budget authority and you do it and you put it out there, and it contradicts 3 other reports that the Energy Department has put out, and nobody really pays any attention in the end. I think you need small groups that are outside the bureaucratic confines of either the academies or government with foundation support to do it.
Thanks very much, John. Oh, we have one last question. We're going to have to move on.
Thank you. The Israeli government has actually a new initiative. It's called Fuel Choices Initiative. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And this is with the Prime Minister's office that is funding or investing in this initiative. And it's too bad you haven't heard about it, because I wanted to ask you what was your opinion. I interviewed about 2 or 3 companies, and they work together within the whole Israeli innovation system. And the biomass is mainly based on algae. And they also look at battery storage of energy, and at electrical vehicles also. And it's a new initiative, but too bad you're not familiar with it, because I wanted to ask you, what do you think of it, in general? And they have lots of companies that are in their incubation stages.
I think that's great. I think you got to do these things. I think you got to explore algae. Algae would maybe solve some problems because it doesn't compete with food, doesn't take arable land, does use an awful lot of water. It's probably going to take genetic engineering, which may, cause some public opposition, and there are more than 50,000 species of algae that are potential sources of biofuels. Not more than a couple thousand have been seriously studied by now. And you're not going to have private capital likely to try and commercialize an algae-based biofuel, knowing that, tomorrow or next year, somebody could look at one of those 48,000 species that haven't yet been studied and find that they can do a lot better than you can. So that's the kind of situation we're in with that. And I hope some of those small companies are successful, but you can't build a climate change policy around that kind of thing.
All right, thanks very much, John. We put you in an isolated position up here after lunch to wake us all up, and you have delivered. You have asked us to declare mitigation a public good and to design new institutions on technological assessment. So thank you very much, and we appreciate your comments very much. This panel will discuss public investment in clean technology from their perspectives in funding bodies and government. This is one of the key ingredients identified this morning. It's a very tricky ingredient, and it's going to be very interesting to hear from those who are actually engaged in it now, what lessons they've heard and or learned, and what they're recommending to us. I'll keep the introductions very short so that we can maximize the amount of discussion time. Their blurbs are in the material that you have. So let me just articulate what their current position is. Heather Campbell is Regional Director, Partnerships at Sustainable Development Technology Canada, where she supports SDTC's efforts in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba from her base in Calgary. Kirk Andres is Managing Director of the Climate Change and Emissions Management Corporation. And Justice Reimer is Assistant Deputy Minister of the Economic Development and Innovation Division in the Government of Alberta. Each of you has about 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll have some discussion after the three of you speak. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. So with the price of oil hovering at about $48 a barrel, consumers may be poised to use clean energy with less reserve than they have recently. For oil producers, really, this price point means it's more important than ever to get the costs of getting oil out of the ground, refining it, and getting to consumers as low as possible. This, for us, is where clean technology comes in. Thank you, Alan, for the introduction, and thank you to Sustainable Prosperity for hosting us here today. My name is Heather Campbell, and I'm representing Sustainable Development Technology Canada, otherwise known as SDTC, for good and obvious reasons. At SDTC, we do one thing, and we do it well. We support Canadian clean technology. Pretty simple, although Alan says it's quite complicated, so I clearly haven't been doing this long enough. We invest in technology projects and work with technology developers so they can turn their innovation into a Canadian success story. A clean technology company that's growing, employing people, making its way to market, and most importantly, enhancing environmental responsibility of Canada's major economic sectors. So right out of the gate, as I mentioned, SDTC has an unwieldy name, something we hear often from our stakeholders. But in a sense, our name describes exactly what we do. We promote sustainable development technologies, or clean technology. These are technologies that enable energy efficiency, technologies that enhance responsible resource use, technologies that support environmental responsibility. Acting on behalf of the Government of Canada, SDTC has built a history, about 12 to 13 years worth of that history, of supporting some of the best clean tech innovations in Canada. We have a portfolio of just under 300 companies and projects valued at about $2.5 billion. All of those projects with a tangible environmental benefit. Armed with new cash, we've been recapitalized by the Government of Canada for another $325 million. We have an open call right now, actually. It closes on April 15th for new applications to our Sustainable Development Tech Fund. And that's the fund that supports pre-commercial demonstration of clean technologies across Canada. We work with companies to manage a technology project from development and demonstration onto a pathway towards commercialization. For those of you that are familiar with technology readiness levels, companies come into us at about a TRL 3 or a 4, and we want to see them exit at an 8 or a 9. That is commercial. So that's an adoption, fully operating as a company, delivering their service, whether that's in Canada or globally. In terms of the financial support we provide to a company, it's typically a non-repayable grant with a warrant. The warrant itself is pretty benign. Our average investment is about $2.5 to $4 million. Round numbers, we're looking at about a third of what they call eligible project costs. Loosely translates to capital costs, but there's a bunch of sort of particulars that define that. So you're really looking at projects that are probably about in the area of $9 to $10 million for size. When I'm talking with folks in my office who are regularly pitching their ideas and concepts, I really say, so when you've come out of your garage with your widget, and you've come out of your bench lab, and you have this, and you need your next development, i.e. your pilot plant, it's really SDTC that you're actually coming to. These technology projects are not led by one company alone. We insist on a consortium, and that's made up of players across the supply chain. We ensure that projects have access to the expertise they need to put the innovation into action within a reasonable budget and built to what industry needs. So in other words, we ensure that the project we fund has and represents a market pull, not a technology push. So when we look at it simply, it's about answers that it's actually providing an answer and a solution to a problem that's been defined. I think we heard about that this morning, about defining the problem. We're not funding answers that don't have problems. Our process begins with an extensive due diligence and vetting process. We're known for that rigorous due diligence. The resulting seal of approval helps our portfolio companies get further support. That's additional follow-on financing, additional strategic partners, globalization opportunities, full gamut. While active, technology developers can expect to work with our team of project managers and screening and evaluation managers, individuals who are specialists in their field, who will guide the project through to completion. We also get involved to help some of our portfolio companies get further investment in industry partnerships after the project's completed. So the idea with SCTC is that you come in, you do your project, and you finish it, and you're wonderfully operating. Everything's wonderful. Success is great. But you're married to us forever. There is no divorce. We collect data on the companies forever because, of course, we want to be able to measure the success, measure their growth, measure their impact in the clean technology community as well as in industry as a whole. Those sectors that I speak about and our priority areas right now are responsible resource development, so that's mitigating environmental impacts associated with Canada's natural resource sector, oil and gas, mining, forestry. Looking at next generation transportation, technologies related to next generation vehicles, having reduced emissions, higher energy efficiency, a focus on freight transportation. Lots of interesting things going on in resource and energy efficiency, particularly in this sector. So that's technologies that can encourage energy efficiency in buildings and industrial processes with a focus on industrial water use, significant demand for water use both in energy efficiency and energy exploration as well as in agriculture. Speaking of such, clean technology, so we've heard a lot about that today, distributed power generation, energy storage, technologies related to carbon capture and storage, integrated energy systems, biorefinery and biochemical production. Agriculture is about 5% of our portfolio right now. It is exponentially growing. We have a number of companies doing interesting things that yield an improved temperature and drought resistant of agricultural crops, precision farming, mitigating land use issues, biodiversity loss, nutrient recovery from wastewater and soils, things of that nature. And then, of course, northern and remote communities, so innovative technologies and solutions for self-sufficiency in smaller communities, such as food security, heavy lift transportation, small-scale renewable energy, and microgrid applications. This is what happens when you change your notes 3 times. So overall, those are the technologies we typically invest in. Companies that I would speak about, I think we're probably going to get questions on it, but I think there's probably 2 companies that I'll talk about right now that really represent some of the really effective things I like to see happening from a clean technology perspective. The first one is GHGSat, Global Emissions Monitoring. So GHGSat is a company out of Montreal, and they basically do emissions monitoring using a satellite, yes, up in the sky. And they've come out of the landfill and waste management business. They're actually now a COSIA joint industry project, so brought into the system by Suncor. The JIP is now led by Imperial Oil, a couple others in that consortium. They're working now on monitoring of tailings ponds for emissions management. SDTC has funded and supported GHGSat. They are out there growing and looking at other sectors across the clean technology industry in which they can apply their technology and grow what is a burgeoning area for emissions management and environmental performance. We have a model that works. Canada's getting technologies to market. It's as good as or better than, I would say, I guess what we've heard is some of the really unfortunate mechanisms or challenging mechanisms, whether they be up or down, or whether that be a rule or a direct subsidy or fiscal subsidy, which has high political collateral, as we heard earlier. But either way, we know that industries are eager to work with us because they get clean tech that fulfills their needs. You've heard of our collaboration, perhaps, with the Canadian Gas Association and the joint fund that we've created with them. What we've done is a market innovation fund where half of the investment is actually Canadian Gas Association members' investment into downstream natural gas technologies and being able to bring those to market. There's a tremendous opportunity for clean tech on the table. I'm going to be quite colloquial about this, and it's almost been a bit the gospel according to Heather, but it's after lunch now, and we're at that point. So if you think about it right now, mentioned it, $48 a barrel oil. Folks are getting a skittish here. It's tough days in Calgary. We're all really tired. If you still have your job and you're a regular process engineer at any one of the myriad of companies you saw as you passed through downtown Calgary, good for you. You didn't get laid off last month. But the 5 to 10% energy efficiency that you were supposed to deliver daily as part of just having a job, that's no longer your mark. It's 40% actually. Your job just got harder, and there's fewer of you to do it. Little other thing, environmental performance expectations, they don't go away just because, well, oil's at $48 a barrel. Actually, they go up. So the line goes like this. Oh, sorry, I guess if the chart was this way, go like that. Okay. So here's the thing. The only way you get to that 40% is actually with technology and innovation. So this is the time to lean in. This is the time to invest in technology, throw off the cloak of risk aversion around technology, be a part of the solution that we do in de-risking these technologies to make them attractive to industry. But yeah, this is the time. Anyway, that's the gospel according to Heather. Worldwide, the clean tech market is worth $3 trillion today. It's a number that we think will grow. We think Canada is an important part of that market. If you have questions about SDTC, I will be around after, and then I'll be heading up to COSIA's Innovation Summit. But I think these fine gentlemen will talk a little bit about a couple of things that we're working on together.
Sure. I've taken up my 8 minutes, right? Or did I spin through that? Excellent. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Kirk Andrews with the Climate Change and Emissions Management Corporation. And we are an Alberta-based not-for-profit with a mandate to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help Alberta adapt to climate change. And we've been in business for a little over 5 years. But I want to set some context for why we even exist. So on a national level, Alberta has about 10% of the population, and we're responsible for 40% of Canada's emissions. And that number is growing. And it's not because we're irresponsible users of energy resources. We are producers of energy resources, and it takes energy to produce energy, and our economy is based on that. And of that emission profile, about 60% of it is industrial. And of that 60%, about 70% of that is from what we call a large final emitter. And a large final emitter is a facility that exceeds 100,000 tons a year. And that is the industry that we're regulating, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So with that in mind, of course, the external perspective on Alberta is one that is not positive. And it's affected our brand and our reputation as a province, and we care deeply about that, and we want to improve that because it's good for business and it's good for Alberta. And we have a responsibility to develop our resources as best we possibly can. So that context has led to the establishment of what's called the Climate Change Strategy for Alberta. It's 2008 version. It's currently under review right now. But I will make a snapshot of what's material in it for us, for CCMC. And that is the targets that Alberta had set for itself, a 50 megaton reduction target by the year 2020, and a 200 megaton reduction by the year 2050. And that's against a forecast of business as usual. Those numbers are big. And I can tell you that Alberta is challenged with achieving that number. And so too is the Canadian government in terms of achieving its targets. So this is big business, and it's not easy business. So I'm going to talk a little bit about CCMC and why it actually works. And it's a combination of creative public policy along with an organization that implements under that framework. So I mentioned Alberta's large final emitters. In law, they have a mandatory requirement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to a specified performance target. And they have a number of flexibility options available to them to achieve those targets, which includes continuous improvement, buying offsets in Alberta's offset market, and we have a functioning offset market here. Or you can pay into the fund, and if you pay into the fund, it's $15 a ton for every ton that is in excess of your target. This has generated between $70 and $100 million annually that comes into the fund, and that's an important feature, annually. So this cash flow that comes into the system is a continuous flow of cash that's made available to invest in technologies. That has catapulted into the creation of CCMC, and I mentioned our mandate already. And we implement that mandate through the development and deployment of technology. And from an organizational point of view, we are not the government of Alberta. We are an independent entity. We're arm's length. We have internally very good business and technical acumen. Our board is a very impressive board. We're a virtual organization. We actually have no formal office, and everybody that works on the operations side, including myself, is a contractor. And we deliver on the objects of the board. And practice, of course, very good governance. Our operating model is pretty straightforward. We align with public policy. We exist within that box I called the climate change strategy. But within that box, we're very free to pursue opportunities that yield the best results. We seek technologies from anywhere in the world, and we're very active in trying to draw those technologies. As long as they have an application for Alberta, we run competitions. So we don't do one-offs. Competitions competitive processes, stimulate innovation and creativity, and they allow us to pick the very best projects on a relative basis. We invest in all stages of technology development, from early right through to deployment, and we manage on the basis of a diverse portfolio. Our process is a pretty simple one. We have a two-staged entry. First is an expression of interest, followed by, and if we like what you say, we will ask you for a more robust application, which includes a heck of a lot more information. And when we receive that, we go through a pretty extensive due diligence process. It includes a review of the technology, certainly the finance, and most importantly, from our mandate's perspective, what is the greenhouse gas value that's coming from this technology? And we assess that on a number of levels. One is at the scale of the project, and the other is at the scale of the market. A board makes a decision. We enter into a contracting phase, and by the way, we don't issue grants. We engage with the proponents on a contribution agreement, which is a legal agreement that has schedules attached to it and so forth. We steward to the schedule. We pay on performance, and that allows us to manage our risk. If things go awry, we can terminate a project early. And lastly, we care about commercialization, because the real prize here is not the technology at an individual facility, but rather the technology being broadly deployed in the marketplace. And from a leverage point of view and achieving greenhouse gas reductions, that's where we get the big benefit. So our performance so far, we have 100 projects underway right now. We've committed almost $250 million of CCMC money, and the total value of the projects we have in play is about $1.65 billion. We get pretty darn good leverage out of that, and the emission reductions that we're forecasted to achieve are almost 11 megatons by 2020, and a market potential of 9.7 megatons by that same time period. I'll point out that the market potential is an ultra-conservative estimate. We estimate 1% market penetration on an annual basis to a total of 10 years, and that's it. So that number is indeed conservative. We've run a grand challenge. I heard comments about challenges and competitions like X Prize and others. We've run one of those. It's on carbon utilization. We have a target attached to that, which is 1 net megaton reduction against that needs to be achieved in Alberta on an annual basis. And we're agnostic about the technology. What we care about is the performance. We have a biological program. In Alberta, there's a theoretical potential of 24 megatons of reductions that can be achieved through biological means. But they're not being done today. And there's all kinds of obstacles, whether it's public policy obstacles, whether it's measurement barriers. We're trying to overcome those. And we have 3 projects in the area of adaptation. One on water, one on Alberta's forests, and one on biodiversity. And we have a couple of active RFPs underway as well. Give you a few examples on transformative technology. These are important technologies in the context of Canada and certainly Alberta. Growing Power Harry Hill, just north of Edmonton, is claimed to be the world's first fully integrated biorefinery. Medicine Hat Concentrated Solar is the first of its kind in Canada. Black Spring Ridge is Western Canada's largest wind utility. The Easy Project is an interesting one. It's a technology where 3 oil sand operators have partnered with a company out of Florida, Harris Corporation. And it's looking at the use of electromagnetic heating to extract bitumen along with some solvent. And if that's successful, there's a forecast of as much as 80% emission reduction and virtually the elimination of the use of water. That's pretty material when you think about, I think in a relative basis, we're in our infancy in the in situ resource. It's 80% of Alberta's oil sands. So if we can find and adopt technologies early, greenfield ones, rather than trying to retrofit, I think we're in a good place. CO2 solutions is an interesting one as well. I think, Heather, you guys are funding that too, right? And it's around carbon capture, and they're using an enzyme in the human respiratory system to do that, which is pretty clever. So I also thought I'd say, yes, we're in the greenhouse gas business, but okay, you're investing in these technologies. What do they mean for the economy? So we just recently commissioned the Conference Board of Canada to produce a report for us. That report was released about 3 weeks ago or so. And we asked them to look at CCMC's current portfolio, the 100 projects. And on a pan-Canadian basis, the total economic impact of those is $2.4 billion and 15,000 person years of employment. In Alberta alone, GDP benefit is $2 billion and more than 12,000 person years of employment. So those are pretty important numbers. I think that's a signal that CO2 is not just an expense. There's an upside to this, there's a positive side to it as well. Oh, forgot to change the slide, sorry about that. And then I thought I'd reflect on a few lessons learned after 5.5 years of operations. There's a few things I'm going to call attributes of the CCMC model that seems to work. And I think these are also overlap with SDTC as well. One is the practice of open innovation. So we are not Alberta-centric. We are looking to find technologies no matter where they exist, and we're looking for ways to connect different sciences together to achieve specific outcomes. It's an important undertaking. We've utilized some service providers that are US-based. A company called 9 Sigma works with us, who are an open innovation company. They help us out in that regard. IP is a big deal. We don't take an interest in IP. Our return on investment is not a cash return. We're not looking for a turnaround in a year and a half. What we're looking for is the greenhouse gas reduction. And that's what we measure and that's what we care about. We represent risk capital, and it's also patient. So we are prepared to work with these technology developers over an extended period of time to help to nurture the development of them through the system. And lastly, we care about commercialization, and we've actually added to our capacity internally services that are offered by Innovates Calgary and Tech Edmonton, who are experts in commercialization services. The success, I think from a CCMC perspective, we are stimulating projects. We certainly are reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We've gotten great leverage, and we're making advances in technology. Those are great. But we do have some challenges going forward. I can't tell you, what I care about is purpose-driven technology. I can't tell you how many, unlike Heather said, we get a lot of technologies that are technology without a problem. And they come our way. And they're sort of like, there's got to be a GHG benefit in this, you know, and they submit it to us and we're supposed to find it. I hate doing that. You know, we want to mobilize the community, if you will, to become very purpose-driven in achieving what we need to achieve. Collaboration is a big deal. And I must say this is a challenge because I think we have different cultures. We've talked a little earlier about, somebody said most of the innovation was coming out of the large companies. Our experience is, it's not. It's the other way around from our perspective. A lot of the innovation is coming out of small and medium enterprises. That's not to say that there aren't focused efforts around innovation such as COSIA, which are specifically dedicated to that function. But in order to have that collaboration work, we need to have the blending of the asset manager, the big, large final emitters, along with the technology developers, along with the technology integrators. And the last point I'll make is we need to make system improvements. So if you're looking at Alberta or Canada's innovation ecosystem, and you wanted to design this from the ground up, would it look like it looks today? And I think the answer is absolutely not. It needs to be a system that's very purpose-driven and very well connected and very well managed. Heather and I have been involved with a group called a fledgling group called the Low Carbon Innovation Alliance. And it is made up of 8 organizations right now that are looking to find ways to bring together the community, the pan-Canadian community, to make more efficient use of human and financial capital to achieve the outcomes that Canada wants to achieve. And I will close with One last point, I think somebody asked, does government play a critical role? Well, of course it does. I think CCMC is a good example of how government can play that role. I talked about the policy and the regulatory environment that Alberta has set up. That has in turn generated finances that we reinvest in technology. Many people have talked about procurement today. I think procurement is underutilized, certainly within government here in Alberta at this point. You probably are aware, I think it was President Obama a week ago, did an executive order that was very much procurement based and mobilizing the purchasing power of the U.S. government. Test centers, we need them. You know, big companies that are in the business of producing barrels of oil or gigajoules of power are into reliability. And it's pretty tough to convince them to bolt on something and test it. So test centers, I think, are important. And the innovation ecosystem, which I talked about already. If you talk to small and medium enterprises, they're constantly going, how do I navigate this thing? And more importantly, I don't even understand what it is. So I can't navigate what I don't understand. On the industry side, SMEs, I've mentioned they're a source of innovation. The supply chain, I think, can be leveraged even better than it currently is. A lot of times the supply chain is looked at a way to procure services or resources in, you know, the cheapest way possible to get what I want done. But that is also a community of people that can bring all kinds of innovation to bear. And then there's the large final emitters and their willingness to take on some risk and be an early adopter. And lastly, we touch on this a little bit in our business, but not a lot, but it is on the consumption side of the business. The people that are actually using the energy that we're producing. And I think more than anything, I think we have, I'll speak to Alberta, I can't speak to anywhere else, but we do have to elevate the consciousness of Albertans. They're aware of climate change. I don't think they fully understand it. We do a lot of polling. Their level of awareness and understanding could be, I think, significantly improved, and with that could come some changes in behavior at the consumer level. So with that, we are open for business. We're just like Heather. We want to hear from you. We have resources to invest. We will invest in, I think our single largest investment in an individual company would be up to $25 million. We require at least a 1-to-1 match. Our match needs to be unencumbered cash. And if you're in the business and you have a purpose-driven project, please come and see us. Thank you very much.
So good afternoon. My name is Justin Reamer. I am one of the aspiring entrepreneurial bureaucrats that John spoke of. And it's a pleasure to be with you here today. These two talked about some very specific programs within the provincial and federal ecosystem. Our role within our mandate in the department is to oversee the provincial funding portion of the innovation ecosystem. And it is a complex system and it is difficult to navigate, and we're continually working at making it less complex. And as a speaker mentioned earlier today, I think it was Dr. Hawkins indicated, the innovation system changes every 6 weeks. I actually think the record is now 8 weeks, I'm counting at this point in time, since we've made a major change to the innovation system. But stay tuned. We'll get there. All right, so the acceleration of clean energy innovation is a core focus, obviously, for our Premier, for our government. You've probably heard our Premier say, if you're in the energy business, you're in the environment business by default. And there's a change mentality, a change in culture with respect to how we responsibly develop our resources and putting environment very much at the forefront and measuring our results on that and ensuring more accountability. And there's continually interesting innovations being tried at both the policy and the innovation level to try and get us further along the goal line than we have to date. From our perspective, I think Alberta has more innovation, publicly funded innovation and business supports than just about any jurisdiction in Canada on a per capita basis when you think about it. There's a lot of players in the system. There's a lot of funding in the system, and we heard about some of those pieces. The challenge is we're not necessarily optimizing the value of all of those support mechanisms towards heading towards a central goal. I've heard characterizations of the innovation system being akin to a soccer team. And if you're familiar with some of the world-class innovation systems out there, you could characterize them perhaps as the German soccer team, where everyone is scattered on the field and knows their position, plays their part, and works effectively to score a goal. Sometimes I think the Canadian innovation system is like a kid's soccer team, where everyone's running around chasing the ball all en masse. Doesn't really care where the goal line is, just, following the ball, moving around. So I think, we need to think of it a little bit like that, and that's unfair to these fine folks and others up here, because I know they collaborate, and I know that they're working harder. But I think sometimes we trip over each other, and I think it's important that we get more commonality around some core central outcomes, some performance indicators, and encourage more accountability, overall system accountability. So that's what we're trying to do as a government right now, is really narrow down our focus. That's what the Premier's asked us to do. We're focused in 5 key areas: environment, energy, fiber, food, and health. And that's it. Those are the core specific areas that we've been asked to focus in on. And if you look at our Alberta Innovates Corps, those are the sectors they're focused in. That doesn't mean there isn't a role for ICT and genomics and other types of things, because they support or contribute to those core baseline sectors. But it's not about government picking winners or losers. It's about picking the races you want to run in. You can't run in all the races. You have to pick the areas where you think you can allocate some resources, where you have some competitive and comparative advantage. So with respect to clean tech, the province takes a very multi-pronged approach to drive innovation in the province. We invest in feed potential for clean energy by building on our fundamental knowledge through early stage research. And I think often the sexiness of this commercialization field gets to populate a lot of the government funding and programming, and we're very clear that we need to continue to fund that baseline early level research, as was so eloquently discussed in this morning around paying attention to the bursts of new innovation and the failures of new innovation as advancements in learning. Advancing Alberta's clean energy agenda through practical application of our scientific knowledge is a core goal, and then turning this knowledge obviously to innovative products and processes and services that support our clean energy markets. I think there's a lot of things going well for this province. We've heard a lot of the negative things, but I think there's a lot of positive things going on as well. We do have a positive business environment and culture that welcomes innovation, relatively speaking. We have universities with robust science and engineering faculties that are in fact globally recognized, including the one you're sitting in today, in areas of energy, environmental science, and tech development. We have world-class science and technology infrastructure and capabilities, much more so than most of our comparator jurisdictions when you really think about it. And we have the successful experience of adapting and implementing technologies to meet our needs, and lots of case study examples were run through today through the presentations. We also have extensive experience with research and technology collaborations and partnerships. There's really a substantial opportunity for the province to play an important role in the development and deployment of clean technologies. We can't do it all. Industry is at the forefront of a lot of this, but there is a positive role we can play, a catalytic role, if you will. And there are parallel goals that were referred to earlier. We are well aware that Alberta's broad and diverse clean technology sector has applications throughout the value chain, and that's something we really need to understand. Is it's not just one particular area. We need to look across the value chain of some of those core sectors we talked about. Main opportunities include incorporating diverse feedstocks. What if we could include biomass as a replacement for diluent, for instance, in processing our oil? Developing new processes and materials for manufacturing and reducing environmental impacts through more energy efficient processes and technologies. Clean technologies are well known in this province for use in water reduction and recycling, developing innovative carbon uses, much of which Kirk is working on with his team, and turning waste into fuel. We're undertaking a number of initiatives and have started a number as well that create the foundation for success in accelerating the commercialization of these clean technologies. One of the things we're actively assessing right now is establishing a mechanism for a first trier or buyer opportunity for technology companies. So back to the procurement power that was discussed earlier. We're actively looking at it. The United States has a pretty good program, SBIR, that has been successful in fostering some of that technology. We want to see if we can do something similar to accelerate and de-risk technology commercialization and adoption. We've been successful in developing a number of strategic partnerships with multinationals such as GE and Siemens to facilitate integration into global value chains, give our SMEs a chance to actually see their technologies adopted into a major global value or supply chain, and access the wonderful global technical and commercial expertise inherent with a lot of these multinationals. We've fostered a number of international partnerships on the technology side with jurisdictions such as Finland to provide our technology companies with opportunities for joint technical development in access to new markets. And we've done fundamental research investments that provide a pipeline to ideas to address clean energy, including our research capacity program that leverages federal funding for leading edge research facilities that keep us at the forefront of the ideas. Some of our platform technology investments, as I mentioned earlier, include nanotechnology, ICT, and the omics. And we've funded and provided support to allow chairs and graduate student supports through organizations such as Alberta Innovates Tech Futures. We've provided support for our Innovate Calgary's Kinetica Energy Technology Accelerator, and I know Peter's here today and the great work that they're doing to enable the market pull of oil and gas industry needs together with Alberta Energy Technologies to accelerate development on a needs-based solution. And we've invested $100 million in the Alberta Enterprise Corporation, which has attracted or expanded over 8 venture capital funds with offices in Alberta. And more than half of these funds invest in innovative companies in the energy and environment sector. Our Alberta Innovates Corporation Environment Energy Solutions has approved a $2 million energy storage call for expressions of interest and has received over 54 different responses. They're currently evaluating them, and several have been shortlisted for a full submission proposal. The province, as I mentioned, supports chairs at the U of A, Calgary, University of Lethbridge, their various different programs. We have the Campus Alberta Innovation Program that's funded through our department that has enabled the establishment of a number of chairs at universities in the province with support for energy and environment research and development. And these chairs bring some of the most talented minds in their field globally to Alberta together with their teams and enhance our innovation potential at the intersections of areas such as geosciences, biotechnology, and material sciences. Now, while the mechanisms and the environment changes over time, we have to remember to be nimble and flexible, which is sometimes tough for government to do. But the approach of supporting the pipeline of ideas, the application of promising technologies, and support for new companies has yielded benefits across many sectors in the past and will continue to have an impact into the future. And some of those examples were mentioned today. Oil sands, right? SAGD. Engineered wood products, oriented strand board was developed, a lot of the resins developed here in Alberta. New crop varieties and management techniques and new health technologies like the ACI silver bandage that was developed near Edmonton. Just a couple examples of how we've supported clean energy most recently. Alberta Innovates has invested $29 million in the large-scale demonstration waste to value-added facility at the Edmonton Waste Management Center. If you're not familiar with the Edmonton Waste Management Center, it's world scale, world class, and there are people from around the world coming to visit it. They've put in place a gasification unit now that burns the majority of non-recyclable material such that they're basically excising out of the waste stream about 90% of the total waste, either through recycling or by burning into a syngas fuel. People around the world want this, and there's a real practical vision that could be applied here. The vision, and Eddie Isaacs calls it, is landfill-free Alberta. We are very close to embarking on a time when we actually don't need landfills anymore. We have the technology, it's commercially proven and demonstratable, and it's right in our backyard, and the shame is most Albertans don't even know about that. Alberta Innovates Environment Solutions is investing in a number of technologies to support water recycling, reduced energy use, and the use of non-potable water in SAGD operations. Those suite of technologies aim to reduce GHG emissions by 10 to 30% over current emissions, and reduce fresh water use by 10 to 20%. This past month, Alberta Innovates Biosolutions launched a new program called Alberta BioFuture that will increase substantially promoting the use of Alberta's renewable resources. The BioFuture is designed to target innovative funding or programs to innovative projects that add value to our agriculture and forestry sectors by developing new bioproducts or biomass. The program has strong industry focus and will leverage public dollars by requiring a level of private investment depending on project type. So the future is bright. There are a lot of assets. There are a lot of successes that we have in this province that most people don't know about. And I think collectively, as a citizenry, if that's a word, society, and as the public and private sector, we need to have a better handle on our successes and communicate those effectively. I think one of the shortcomings we've certainly had as an innovation system is we're not getting the good word out of the things we've already done and the things we've already accomplished. And by doing that, that will inspire more and inspire progress into the future. So thank you for your time and attention today.
Well, it's so good to hear so much good news coming out of Alberta. We're a bit over time, but I really would like to take 2 or 3 questions at least at this stage. Do we have any comments from the audience? Please.
Prit Kotecha. A question on adoption rates of technology. I think there's fantastic efforts being done around technology development and de-risking. I heard all of you guys speak about de-risking, which is really important as you get to that final stage of adoption. And the test centers concept, I think, is, again, very innovative to sort of accelerate that and share the knowledge around the de-risk technologies. I guess, I'm sort of, this is a question, I guess, I have for potentially yourself around, there comes a point where, of what I've learned this morning, when you go around that cycle, that standardization is important. And there's this fine line between adoption and standardization. I think policy does have a play there, where you come to a level where there's, you've de-risked it, but there's always going to be a residual risk that companies will have to, industries will have to take on. And I guess I wanted to get your perspective on, from a government perspective, like what signals are you looking for to move to that standardization component as we look at technology or as we look at innovation in its cycle?
You want to go first? You want to go first? Go ahead. Okay. Prit, I think I'm going to answer that question in about 3 parts, so I indulge me with a little bit of patience there. So I think the first thing is, from an SDTC perspective, we spend a lot of time making sure we have really strong strategic partnerships in place, both as industry co-investment. Folks in the room, Juan Benitez is here from Synovus, Encana, Enbridge are strong co-investment partners. So that matching exercise where they're a part of the consortium, they're actually putting their investment into those projects leads to some of that commercialization and draws that adoption stream and that line clearly. So first part. Second part, we heard a lot this morning about exporting of technologies and relationships globally. One of the things that SDTC has formed is a really strong and a formal relationship. Actually, we have an MOU with EDC, Export Development Canada. EDC, as they function as a bank, it allows them to provide a lot of the bonding, underwriting, and opportunities they have and investment vehicles they have, but also allows them to actually give globalization and export opportunities to the 90% of our companies that are small, medium enterprises that have technology solutions that are applicable globally and then can be adopted. So a win from an SDTC perspective doesn't necessarily mean it has to be these are successful Canadian companies. Doesn't mean that their technology has to be adopted in Canada. Okay. Third, in terms of that technology adoption, and again drawing that line and trying to make those connections stronger, I would say is, with a very collegial attitude up here, and that's actually quite purposeful. We work very strongly together and do a significant amount, at least Kirk and I, and absolutely to the province as well, of co-investment. I would say that there's opportunities that I could probably name, but I'd get in trouble, where we've identified high-flying companies where the province has said, we will put additional investment into those companies because they are going to bring prosperity to Albertans, prosperity to our industry, and deliver the environmental performance solutions that we need. Similarly, Kirk and I work together on a lot of companies, particularly in Alberta, who are delivering those solutions. They also insist on a consortium. If you heard Kirk, it actually is a 50% match. So someone's got to be there wanting that solution. And so bringing those pieces together, the technology adoption piece, it's a little more challenging in this economic environment. So we're going to have to work a little bit harder. But I think we've got a good framework in place to support that because of those three items.
You're more closer to the ground.
I'm more closer to the ground,
Yeah.
oh my.
Yes.
Okay, I'll just offer more of a, I guess a CCMC policy response on adoption. I mentioned that we find technologies anywhere in the world. We care about them as long as they have an application to Alberta. So that's the first condition. They don't have to be developed here, but they have to be able to be applied here. So on the adoption side of things, as it relates to IP, intellectual property, I said we don't care about the IP. I meant we don't take an ownership interest in it, but we do care about it to the extent. Yes, it is. To the extent that that the technology is made available on commercial terms. So we will not fund a project where it gives competitive advantage to a single company. So a condition around us is that your intention, and you have to demonstrate that to us, that you will be deploying this selling this technology, whether it be, well, any mechanism possible, so that it's deployed in Alberta in a broad context.
And I just say, as a province, as a funder, we don't dictate the organizations on what their adoption or commercialization standards are. But I think what we're really focused on is outcomes and trying to get the laggards up to the higher performers and understanding what the best practices are and continually evolving and supporting those that are achieving success.
Prit, I know you asked a question around standardization. I think let's use jet fuel as an example. Jet fuel is an interesting product. It's very close on the distillation column to diesel and a bunch of other things, and you have to make jet fuel right every time. Canadians like it that way, quite simply. But we have companies who are working on biojet. If we were looking at a standardization, well, there is no standard to meet. It needs to be just like Jet A1. It needs to be drop-in. It needs to use the same infrastructure. It needs to meet the exact same conditions in terms of operability. And absolutely, if it's going to have some enhanced environmental benefit, fantastic. But the critical conditions are the ones I mentioned earlier. Drop-in infrastructure, exact same operability conditions. So it's not about necessarily in all cases with clean technology about setting a new standard. It's about meeting an existing standard.
Thanks very much. We do have other questions back here, but I'm going to have to ask you to hold off. We're a bit over time. You know how to reformulate your question. Add it to the next panel. Heather, Kirk, and Justin, thank you very much for a very stimulating panel. And Jeremy and Stephen and Juan will talk about everything we've talked about so far. And applied research in particular are relevant to industry through each of their own perspectives. Jeremy is a full professor in the Faculty of Law at the University of Ottawa. and as well is a practicing lawyer and an expert consultant. Steve Larder is Canada Research Chair and Professor of Petroleum Geology at the University of Calgary, Department of Geoscience. Steve was the Scientific Director of Carbon Management Canada, Inc., supporting Canada's academic research in the area of decarbonizing fossil fuel. And Juan is a Senior Specialist for Strategic Partners at Cenovus. And I won't say any more, Juan. That says a lot. We'll see. Over to you, panel. You each have about 8 minutes. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak about my research on how innovation happens and what policymakers should do about it. More particularly, I'm going to speak about an issue which we've heard hinted at but not fully explored. That's the issue of open innovation and the role that marketplace framework policies, and especially intellectual property policies, have to play in the context of open innovation. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the research assistance of Andrew Martinez, a graduate student here that's with me, and the support of Sustainable Prosperity for allowing us to share this research, which was funded by SSHRC, Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. It's very important, I think, to take the encouragement that Dr. Nicholson spoke about at the beginning of the day to look at these issues in historical perspective, to look at innovation policy and performance in historical perspective. And that's important because when we look at the context in which innovation happens in the 21st century, it's very different than the context in which innovation happened in the 20th century. And understanding those differences in the historical perspective is important. We see that innovation is increasingly open. You've heard the phrase open innovation from multiple speakers today. There's a vast body of peer-reviewed literature and policy reports, books galore, about what open innovation is. When you distill that vast body of literature and thinking that's emerged really in the last 10 or 15 years about open innovation, it falls into two categories, and it's important to distinguish because when people say open innovation, they often mean one of two quite different things. The first thing people mean when they say open innovation is that the firm or the company is open to the idea of innovating in collaboration with other people. It's the openness of the company to collaboration with other people. The other way in which you hear people talk about open innovation is in the openness of the innovation itself, the openness of the ideas. And this refers essentially to the non-proprietary nature of the innovation that's at issue. So openness can be used to describe either the attitude of the company toward collaboration or the nature of the innovation itself and the degree to which it's open to anyone to use. That's very different. There are a number of examples of open innovation in practice in the area of clean technology. Clean technology is not the space where open innovation first emerged. That's credited mostly to software and the ICT industry. COSIA is a great example. We've heard a little bit about that, but it's not the only example of open innovation in clean energy. There are a number of others. Open innovation initiatives started by Nike and Best Buy around manufacturing. They've created something called the Green Patent Exchange, a mechanism of sharing manufacturing-related patent information. There's an initiative started by IBM when David Kapos, who went on to become the head of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, started the Eco Patent Commons. Recently, you may have heard about open innovation in the area of hybrid electric vehicle technology. Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX, founder of PayPal, and now the CEO and founder of Tesla Motors, recently announced, just last year, announced that their strategy of acquiring patents for technology related to hybrid electric vehicles was misguided, in his words, and that what had happened was inadvertently the creation of a thicket, that there were actually too many patents around this particular technology. It's very interesting when you refer back to the images that Dr. Johnstone had shown, the graph of the patenting trends in particular technologies. Hybrid electric vehicle related technologies was showing the highest rate of growth. Well, what Tesla decided to do was announce that it was going to basically open up its entire portfolio of patents to the world so that anybody else could take that technology, build upon it, and develop a more sophisticated market for this particular technology. So there are a number of examples ranging from manufacturing to resource extraction to the automotive industry to biotechnology. I think it's important to appreciate what the key factors are that lead companies to adopt an open innovation strategy. And there are 5 really key factors. The first is labor mobility. In the 20th century, it was very common for individuals to spend an entire career working in one place. But as the nature of the labor market changed, people moved from job to job. It became increasingly difficult for single companies to keep know-how in-house. So when your employees move to other jobs, their knowledge and ideas go with them. So in fact, what you have is knowledge spilling over firm boundaries. Another factor is product design, product or process design. The more complex the product becomes, or the more complex the process becomes, the less likely it is that any single company can provide a solution that solves all the needs. And so when we look at innovation that is what's called cumulative or sequential, innovation that builds on other innovations or is part of an overall process, it's more likely that open innovation works in that kind of an environment. Another factor is infrastructure, and in particular information and communication technology infrastructure. The easier it is for ideas to bounce into each other and ideas to collide, the more likely open innovation is to be successful. And so when we have something like the internet, this is basically like Michael Porter's cluster theory for ideas. The easier it is for ideas to collide, the more innovation happens through open mechanisms. A fourth is market institutions, and perhaps one of the most important is the decentralization of financing and the emergence of venture capital markets, which make it more possible for people to innovate more openly. And another, which I think characterizes COSIA particularly well, is the industry context, and that is where a group of companies have a shared objective. Now, Peter Baudouin called this he basically spoke about public goods theory when he said that the reason COSIA collaborates on clean energy innovation is because if there's a clean technology innovation, all firms benefit equally from the adoption of that innovation. Similarly, if there's a failure to innovate, all firms suffer in the same way. Well, this is the classic public goods problem. And what we see is open innovation tends to work where markets have not developed sophisticated pricing mechanisms that allow firms to internalize the benefits of that innovation or to appropriate the benefits exclusively. Now, one of the classic policy responses to that problem of externalities was to set up a sophisticated intellectual property system so that a company could exclude other companies using this artificial artifact of a patent or a copyright or a trademark, as the case may be, to exclude competitors. What we're increasingly seeing is private sector organizations that actually don't want to take advantage of that opportunity, but rather seek to collaborate. That's a profound change because our market framework policy structures are still geared toward the mechanisms through which innovation happened in the 20th century. So what I'm suggesting is that we need to take a very hard look at everything from finance and investment to bankruptcy and insolvency to competition policy to intellectual property, and to basically test those marketplace framework policies against the realities of how the private sector is innovating in the 21st century. And I have some work on that, which I'd be pleased to discuss further, a paper that I recently prepared for the Department of Industry that I'm pleased to share with anyone who's interested in that topic. So thank you very much.
whole new perspective on R&D spend in the oil and gas sector now. I'm gonna do it in multiples of Halloween candy. That's gonna be my next talk. Thank you. Hope you're all still awake. It's almost coma hour. I was on vacation last week, so right now would be a Corona time, right around 3 o'clock. So, thank you. I'm with Cenovus Energy. Just a little background on Cenovus. Cenovus is a Canadian oil company with about 4,500 staff. We're focused on creating long-term value through the development of our expansive oil sands assets. And we've developed some and pioneered some really interesting specialized methods to bring oil up from the subsurface and minimize land disturbance. We also operate the world's largest CO2 enhanced oil recovery project and storage project. And we co-own 2 refineries in the United States. As a company, we're very committed to being a responsible developer of one of Canada's most valuable and important assets, which is the oil sands. And we operate primarily through what's called in situ projects, which is we extract our oil from subsurface, oil that's just too deep to mine. So getting on to innovation, which is my favorite topic. If you think about it, it wasn't that long ago that people thought it was impossible to extract the oil in the oil sands, aside from mining. They just couldn't think of a way that we could mobilize this really thick, almost solid oil and get it to flow so that we could extract it in the subsurface, and to do it in a way that really disrupted the surface as little as possible. And some very ingenious Canadians were the innovators who figured this out through AOSTRA. One of our senior executives, in fact, was part of that team. And they figured it out. It was Canadians who figured it out. Somebody said this morning, it wasn't Houston who was going to come up here and figure it out. It was a Canadian problem, and Canadians figured out how to do it. We came up with the innovation. And when you think about it, it's not just one technology really that enabled this. It is a whole host of technologies that enables oil sands to be extracted the way that we extract it. So to produce our oil, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, what we do is we drill 2 horizontal wells, one above the other, with extremely high precision to locate them exactly where we want them in the reservoir. And we inject steam in the top one, and through gravity, well, we inject the steam and melts the bitumen, and through gravity, that we get the oil to flow to the lower well where we pump it out to the surface. And it's better known as steam-assisted gravity drainage, or SAGD, which probably most of you here are familiar with. But one of the innovations that came out of the whole SAGD was everybody wanted to limit surface impact. So one of the things that we do, and pretty much everybody else in the sector does now, is we drill multiple wells from a pad. And so we'll drill multiple pairs in a kilometer in each direction out of a pad. So we can actually access a huge part of our reservoir with a very small surface footprint. And that in itself was an innovation. And now I think they use that now in tight oil as well. They do multiple wells from pads there as well. So we believe that this, the SAGD, represents the future of the oil sands. About 60% of the oil sands production today is through SAGD, and every year that's increasing. Cenovus is a leader in this technology, and our business exists because of the innovation that allowed this technology to occur. But we also know that there's a lot of room for our industry to improve. We're pretty new into this thing when you think about it. One of our biggest challenges that our industry has is reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. Now, while technology has for the sector has helped us reduce our carbon intensity, if you will, our CO2 emissions per barrel of oil by about 26% since 1990. We still believe that there's lots of room and it's necessary for us to go further with that and improve that further. So with respect to GHGs, it's important to remember that for the type of operation that we have is our GHGs come from burning natural gas to create the steam to melt the bitumen. And so that's what we have to figure out is how can we figure out how to combust the natural gas more efficiently. And why is it relevant? Because it applies to a lot of other industries. So the power generation business and other industries combust natural gas. And so if we can figure that out for ourselves, if we can improve our combustion and reduce our GHGs from combustion, we can help other industries. And conversely, we can now also look at other industries for solutions to apply to our industry. And as a result, we now have a lot of firms that are focusing on that. And we're also looking externally. Before we used to look internally, now we're also looking externally, globally, to find all of these smart minds that can help us work on these problems. So that's the broad scope of, at a very high level, of how innovation really allowed oil sands to exist, for the SAGD process to exist. There's a ton of work to be done yet. But here's some lessons that we've learned. So we believe that if it wasn't for innovation, we wouldn't be able to tap this massive resource that Canada has and provide the economic value to Canada. But we also believe that it's innovation that's going to help our industry solve its really tough and important challenges going forward. And as one of our executives often says, he says, you know, on the technology front, we're pretty early on in this. And if you were to use an analogy of a baseball game, we're kind of in the first inning of a baseball game as far as technology and innovation adoption into our industry is concerned. Another lesson that we've learned, and COSIA is a really good example of this, is we've all discovered that we're better off to collaborate to solve some of these really tough challenges that we have. Collaboration allows you to leverage your people, leverage your money, leverage your technical expertise, and tackle a lot more problems and bigger problems than you could if everybody does it on their own. And COSIA is proving to be a really good example of how effective collaboration is. So that's not something our sector has really been comfortable with historically, but has learned that collaboration is the way that we have to work to succeed going forward. The other big lesson, just in the few years I've been with Cenovus, is we always used to look internally for all of our solutions, and now we've started to understand the open innovation, that there's a lot of very smart people in the world that come from other sectors that can look at our problems in a way that we don't, and they can come up with solutions that maybe we couldn't have. And so our sector is now looking and searching externally for people to work on our issues. And what it means is we have access to a lot more people, and we have access to people who look at our problems in a different way. And I've in my role here at Cenovus, in the investment fund, I've seen a lot of really good technologies applied to our sector developed by people who weren't from our sector. And it's really great to see that. And then the final lesson that we've learned is, as much as we want to adopt technologies faster and faster in our industries, it's tough. You know, we're a risk-averse industry for a good reason, and that is we spend billions of dollars to build facilities, and to just throw a technology into a facility that's risky can cost a lot of money. And so it was Kirk, I believe, who said, you know, so how do we de-risk these things? Well, the test centers that are being built in Alberta will go a long way to help adoption. So when you can test things at a large scale, it's much, much easier to for companies like us to say, okay, well, it's been tested at scale, the risk is gone, we can either retrofit or add that to a new design. And the other big change in our sector that's helping to de-risk technologies to improve with the adoption is COSIA. So now we have groups of companies working on projects and groups of companies helping to de-risk these technologies so that when they finally come out of the funnel, all the other companies are comfortable with that technology and they'll adopt it much quicker. So so those are kind of the big lessons learned, and I'll stop now because you're standing up and it's time for me to go.
Thank you very much. I owe you one question back here, so over to you first.
My name is David Lazell at the University of Calgary. What I guess I was listening to the Auditor General report for both provincially and federally on the climate change investments is, I think both provincially and federally they say we're not going to meet climate change commitments in 2020, let alone 2050. And we've heard a lot about innovation and the importance of that. We've heard about the exciting things they're doing at SDTC. Is it possible to meet, say, 2020 commitments? How much more money will it cost? And for organizations like SDTC or other organizations like CCEMC, and where should that money be invested?
There you go. Who wants to take that on? This will help the concluding panel if you would start the answers right here.
I don't know the answers to most of those questions. But what I suspect is that if we are to succeed, it's going to take what's called a radical or disruptive innovation, right? We're not talking about tinkering at the margins or something incremental. And when you look at where radical or disruptive discontinuous innovation comes from, it's very rarely incumbents that come up with those kinds of innovations. It's almost always disruptors. And the innovation policymaker's dilemma is not unlike the innovator's dilemma that Clay Christensen described. The innovator's dilemma is that as long as you're doing reasonably well, you have no incentive to change. The innovation policymaker's dilemma is that we seem to be doing fine, so what's the incentive to change? But even more problematically, you don't know what's going to come next. So this is the nature of innovation. It's by definition unpredictable and disruptive, and you never know what's going to supplant the incumbents or the status quo. And so we've heard a little bit about trying to pay attention to the unborn entrepreneur, the unborn innovator, what's going to happen next. And that's really the heart of the challenge, I think.
Juan, last word to you.
I mean, from an oil sands perspective, where do greenhouse gases come from? They come from the burning of natural gas. So you can either make that more efficient, and it's pretty efficient today, it could be better, or you eliminate the need to burn natural gas to produce the oil. So I know there's a lot of work going on right now in the industry for waterless extraction. There's solvents and polymers and all sorts of different applications. But again, it's not a simple problem. Reservoir engineering is never a simple problem to get over. But that's really, from an oil sands perspective, that's really where the big impact will come from.
Right, I think we're going to have to hold it there. Thank you very much, Jeremy, Stephen, Juan. Fabulous presentations. Appreciate it very much.